We want to look at effectiveness of monetary and fiscal policy in ISLM model. Now let's first look at what do we mean by effectiveness. By effectiveness, we mean the size of the effect on output of a given change in the policy variable. For an effective policy is one where you will get a larger output response for a given change in the policy variable. We will now show that the effectiveness of monetary and fiscal policy depends upon the slope of ISLM curves, which in turn are determined by certain behavioral parameters of our model. In the case of fiscal policy, we will see that these parameters influence the extent of crowding out, which tends to reduce the effectiveness of fiscal policy. And in the case of monetary policy, we will see that these parameters influence the strength of the monetary transmission mechanism through which monetary policy works. So when we're understanding the economic intuition behind the effectiveness of fiscal policy, so think about factors which influence the crowding out, which reduces effectiveness of fiscal policy. And when we're thinking about the economic intuition behind factors that affect monetary policy, think about factors that influence the strength of the monetary transmission mechanism through which monetary policy works. So we're going to start off with effectiveness of monetary policy. So we essentially want to look at the response of output to a given change in our money supply. So we'll first look at monetary policy effectiveness and the slope of IS curve. Then we'll look at monetary policy effectiveness and slope of LM curve. So right now we want to look at monetary policy effectiveness and slope of IS curve. So we'll compare the effects of expansionary monetary policy on output when the IS curve is steep, as we can see in panel B, and when the IS curve is flat, as we can see in panel A. In each case, we can see the expansionary monetary policy shifts the LM curve to the right from LM to LM prime. In both panels, we have this rightward shift. You can see the slope of the LM curve is same in both graphs because right now we're interested in monetary policy effectiveness and slope of IS curve, so we're keeping the slope of LM curve the same. The size of shift in LM curve is also the same in both cases. Now we can see from the figures that the effect on output of an expansionary monetary policy is larger when the IS curve is relatively flat, as in panel A. You can see we see greater increase in output as compared to panel B, where IS curve is relatively steep. So from here we see the monetary policy is more effective when you have a relatively flatter IS curve. That's the conclusion we draw from these graphs. Now this is just a graphical analysis. We want to try to understand the economic intuition behind why monetary policy is more effective when IS curve is relatively flatter. So let's try to understand the economic intuition behind it now. So let's understand the economic intuition. Now in the diagram that we just saw over here, I'm sorry, no, my bad. So in the diagram that we just saw over here, the panel A, the flat IS curve. So in the diagram, above the flat IS curve now reflects either a large interest responsiveness of investment or a large multiplier or both. This is something that we already discussed when we looked at factors that determine the slope of the IS curve, where we know a flat IS curve reflects either large interest responsiveness of investment or a large multiplier or both, right? So now the question rises, how do these affect effectiveness of monetary policy? Like we said, whenever we're going to think about the economic intuition behind monetary policy, we're going to think about factors that influence the strength of the monetary transmission mechanism through which monetary policy works. So in order to see how interest responsiveness of investment and a multiplier affect the effectiveness of monetary policy, we're going to look at our monetary transmission mechanism. Our monetary transmission mechanism, what does it say? It says that when you change money supply, that changes interest rate, which changes investment, which in turn changes output. So like we said, the effectiveness of monetary policy depends upon factors which influence the strength of this monetary transmission mechanism. Right, and this includes one, interest sensitivity of investment, because see, interest sensitivity of investment controls this link between change in interest rate and change in investment. If investment demand is very interest sensitive, a given decrease in interest rate leads to a large increase in investment, hence a large increase in output, right? So you have a more effective monetary policy where the impact of a given change in money supply is going to be larger in output, right? So this link is strong between delta R and delta I in the monetary transmission mechanism, right? So this is why interest sensitivity of investment influences the effectiveness of monetary policy, because it influences this link between R and I in the monetary transmission mechanism. What about the multiplier? The multiplier controls this link between change in investment and change in output. If the multiplier is larger, a given increase in investment has a larger multiplier effect on output. So a larger multiplier means the link between change in I and change in investment and change in output is larger. So like we've seen over here, okay, interest sensitivity of investment, it influences the effectiveness of monetary policy because it controls the link between change in interest rate and change in investment. Multiplier, it influences the effectiveness of monetary policy because it controls the link between change in investment and change in output. So in short, We're seeing expansionary monetary policy is more effective if IS curve is relatively flat, that we saw in panel E. As a flat IS curve reflects either a large interest responsiveness of investment or a large multiplier or both. And we know both of these things increase the strength of the monetary transmission mechanism through which monetary policy works, making monetary policy more effective. So whenever you want to think about factors that influence the strength of the monetary policy, you think about factors that influence the strength of the monetary transmission mechanism through which monetary policy works.